What if the world before the flood was more advanced than our own? Deep beneath layers of ancient silt and crushed stone, something is buried that history refuses to acknowledge. Look closer at what the myths are actually describing. Not gods, not magic, precision gears, pressurized steam, intricate automatons that harness the raw forces of the earth. Every major civilization on the planet whispers of a mechanical dawn that rivaled our own, and modern archaeology calls it impossible. But the metal does not lie. By the end of this investigation, you will see the cold, hard evidence of a lost industrial age, who possessed it, why it was deemed too dangerous to survive, and what catastrophic force was unleashed to erase every last trace of it beneath the rising waters. The forbidden craft was not a legend. It was a warning. The sun rises over a horizon that no longer exists. Before the oceans claimed the continents and before the mountains were pushed to their current height, there is a world of vibrant, terrifying complexity. This is the antediluvian era, a period often dismissed as a primitive myth, yet the ancient texts tell a different story. They speak of a time when the earth is young, the atmosphere is heavy with oxygen, and the minds of men are turned toward a singular, dangerous pursuit. This is a mastery of the physical world through forbidden means. We call this era the Gopherwood Age, named after the legendary material used to construct the only vessel intended to survive the coming erasure. To understand the technology of this lost world, one must first look at the environment. The world before the flood is not the world we know today. Ancient traditions and geological hypotheses suggest a planet shrouded in a vapor canopy, a greenhouse environment where life grows to gargantuan proportions. In this world, the biological and the mechanical begin to blur. The trees are not merely wood, and the stones are not merely rock. There is a density to the matter of the pre-flood world that provides the raw materials for an engineering feat beyond our modern comprehension. Central to this mystery is the substance known as gopher wood. In the traditional narratives, it is a material of the ark, but the word itself is an etymological ghost. It appears nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. Some scholars suggest it refers to a process rather than a species of tree. It may describe wood that has been laminated, treated with resins, or perhaps even impregnated with minerals to create a substance as strong as steel but with the buoyancy of cedar. Imagine a world where timber is treated with alchemical precision, turned into a composite material capable of withstanding the pressures of collapsing atmosphere and a rising deep. This is not the work of primitive shipwrights with stone adzes. This is the work of a civilization that understands the molecular integrity of their materials. The echoes of this age are found in the lineage of those who stayed on the land. In the 4th chapter of Genesis, we are introduced to a figure named Tubal-Cain. The text describes him as an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. This is a critical distinction. He is not merely a blacksmith hammering out a single plowshare. He is an instructor, a master of a guild, a man who systematizes the extraction and refinement of metals. In the documentary record of the ancient world, brass and iron usually appear much later in human history, separated by thousands of years. Yet, in the Gopherwood Age, they coexist. This suggests a leap in metallurgical science where the heat of the forge is harnessed to create alloys that should not exist for another 5 millennia. We must imagine the cities of Cain. These are not clusters of mud huts. They are sprawling urban centers built on the principles of geometry and celestial alignment. The inhabitants of these cities do not view the world as a mystery to be feared, but as a machine to be operated. They develop hydraulics to redirect the great rivers of the Edenic Plateau. They construct massive gears of basalt and bronze to mill grain and lift stones that weigh hundreds of tons. The landscape is dotted with monoliths that serve as both calendars and power conduits, capturing the static electricity of a high-pressure atmosphere. But where does this knowledge come from? The ancient accounts, particularly the Book of Enoch, provide a chilling answer. They speak of the Watchers, celestial beings who descend to the earth and trade secrets for influence. These beings teach humanity the arts of metallurgy, the crafting of swords and knives, and the secrets of the stars. This is a forbidden technology. It is technology that does not evolve naturally through trial and error, but is gifted from an external source. It is a shortcut to power. The result of this gifted knowledge is a world that becomes increasingly violent and efficient. The craftsmanship of the Gopherwood Age is not dedicated to the betterment of the soul, but to the dominion of the flesh. We see evidence of this in the megalithic foundations found at the lowest levels of sites like Baalbek or the Giza Plateau, where the precision of the stone cutting defies the logic of copper tools. These are the remnants of mechanical sophistication that uses vibration, sound, and immense pressure to shape the very bones of the earth. In the workshops of the antediluvians, the air hums with the sound of grinding gears and the roar furnaces. They develop what we might recognize as early forms of automation. If you can master the alloy and the lever, you can build machines that mimic the movements of living things. There are whispers in the apocryphal texts of bronze guardians and automated looms. This is a civilization that reaches a peak of technical achievement that rivals our own industrial revolution, yet it is built on a foundation of spiritual decay. The forbidden nature of this technology lies in its purpose. It is designed to bypass the natural order. While the descendants of Seth remain connected to the rhythms of the earth and the commands of the divine, the line of Cain seeks to build a world that is self-sustaining and independent of its creator. They seek to conquer death through longevity and to conquer space through massive architecture. This is the hubris of the Gopherwood Age. It is a belief that because one can manipulate the physical world, one has become the master of it. As the era reaches its zenith, the earth itself begins to groan under the weight of this industry. The mining operations of the pre-flood world are not the small pits we find in the Bronze Age. They are vast, scarring the landscape as they strip the earth of the rare minerals needed for their strange alloys. There is a sense of urgency in their construction, as if the elites of that world know that the equilibrium is shifting. They build their massive vaults and their high towers not just for glory, but for survival. The mechanical prowess of the Gopherwood Age is also reflected in their understanding of the heavens. They do not just watch the stars, they calculate the mechanics of the cosmos. They understand the precession of the equinoxes and the cycles of the planets with a mathematical precision that will not be seen again until the modern era. This knowledge allows them to predict the very catastrophe that is coming, yet their response is not repentance, but more engineering. They believe they can build their way out of a global judgment. We see this in the design of the Ark itself. While often depicted as a simple wooden box, a closer look at the dimensions and the description of its internal structure reveals a masterpiece of naval engineering. It is designed with a 3-tier system, a ventilation chimney, and a coating of pitch that acts as a waterproof membrane of incredible durability. It is a vessel of survival that utilizes every advancement of the Gopherwood Age, but reproposed for divine mandate rather than human ego. It is the pinnacle of their technology, stripped of its violent intent. But what of the machines that did not make it onto the Ark? What of the great engines that powered the cities of the Nephilim? As the rains begin to fall and the fountains of the great deep break open, the mechanical wonders of the pre-flood world are overwhelmed. The bronze gears are seized by silt. The great basalt towers are toppled by the shifting of tectonic plates. The complex hydraulics are drowned in a surge of water that reshapes the continents. The technology is not just destroyed, it is buried. It is pushed deep into the strata of the earth, hidden away under miles of sediment and rock, leaving only the faintest echoes in the form of out-of-place artifacts that continue to baffle modern archaeology. We are left with a haunting question. If a civilization as advanced as the one described in the Gopherwood Age could be completely erased, what does that say about the permanence of our own achievements? The relics of that time are few, but they speak of a world where man played with the fires of creation and was ultimately consumed by them. The forbidden technology was not just about the tools themselves, but about the heart of the craftsmen who used them. As we look at the remnants of these ancient shadows, we see a reflection of a world that chose a machine over the spirit, a choice that led to a silence that lasted for generations. The Gopherwood Age is a testament to the heights of human ingenuity and the depths of human arrogance. It is a period where the impossible was made manifest through bronze, iron, and the mysterious resins of a lost forest. As we move forward in our journey, we must look closer at the specific artifact that has survived the crushing weight of the flood, seeking the ghosts of the machines that once ruled the world before the water came. These are the fragments of a broken mirror, showing us a glimpse of a power that was deemed too dangerous to remain under the sun. High on the frozen ridges of Mount Hermon, the air grows thin and the stars seem close enough to touch. It is here, according to the ancient chronicles of the Eno-Sheik tradition, that a seismic shift in the human story begins. 200 beings, described as the Watchers, descend from the celestial heights. They do not arrive as conquerors with swords, but as instructors with secrets. This is not the gradual evolution of primitive man. This is an injection of high-level intelligence into a world still learning the basic rhythms of the seasons. The blueprint they carry is not written on parchment or stone. It is a fundamental reorganization of the physical world. Before this moment, humanity lived in a state of participation with nature. Afterward, they began to master it. The leader of this group, Simjaza, binds his companions with a dark oath, knowing that the knowledge they are about to share will change the trajectory of the earth forever. They are the architect of a new reality, one built on the principles of extraction, manipulation, and artifice. Among these instructors, one name resonates with a particularly cold clarity, Azazel. To the modern eye, the gifts he brings might sound like the simple tools of a blacksmith, but to the people of the ancient world, these are the foundations of mechanical revolution. Azazel teaches the making of swords and knives, shields, and breastplates. This is more than the birth of warfare. It is the introduction of metallurgy as a precise science. He shows them how to identify the veins of the earth, how to smelt ores at temperatures that should be impossible for the era, and how to temper metal into edges that do not dull. The blueprint of the Watchers treats the earth as a storehouse of raw materials waiting to be harnessed. The forge becomes the first laboratory. In these subterranean workshops, the rhythmic strike of the hammer signals the end of the Stone Age and the beginning of something far more complex. The fire is no longer just for warmth or cooking. It is a tool for transformation. Under the guidance of the Watchers, humans learn the secrets of alloying, mixing soft copper with tin to create bronze, and eventually the mastery of iron. This is the first forbidden technology, the ability to reshape the bones of the earth into instruments of power. But the blueprint extends beyond the battlefield. Azazel also reveals the secrets of the metals of the earth that serve a different purpose. He teaches the art of the bracelet and the ornament, the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids. To a documentary observer, this might seem trivial, but in the context of the forbidden arts, it represents the birth of vanity and the manipulation of appearance. This is a mechanical alteration of the self. By teaching humans how to use minerals and pigments to change their features, the Watchers introduce the concept of the mask. The face is no longer a natural gift, but a surface to be engineered. This pursuit of artificial beauty is presented as a corruption, a way of using technology to deceive and to lure, creating a social hierarchy based on artifice rather than essence. As we move deeper into the ruins of this lost epoch, we find the influence of other instructors. A Mazarak teaches the secrets of the sorcerers and the cutters of roots. While this is often interpreted as magic, in a mechanical context, it suggests an advanced understanding of pharmacology and botany. The Watchers provide a blueprint for the chemical manipulation of the human mind and body. They reveal which plants can heal, which can kill, and which can induce visions. This is a technology of the spirit, a way to bypass the natural limits of human consciousness through external substances. Then there's the science of the heavens. Amaros teaches the resolving of enchantments, while Barakaidal instructs in the astrology of the stars. Kokabio reveals the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, and Shamshil the signs of the sun. In the modern world, we separate astronomy from astrology, but in the Watcher's blueprint, they are one and the same, the mechanics of the cosmos. These beings teach humanity how to track the movements of the celestial bodies with mathematical precision. They introduce the concept of time as a measurable, divisible resource. Imagine a world where the rising of the sun was a divine mystery, suddenly replaced by a world where the sun is a gear in a massive, predictable machine. The Watchers provide the calculations necessary to predict eclipses, to map the zodiac, and to navigate the great oceans. This is a birth of the chronometer and the astrolabe, even if the physical artifacts have long since rusted into dust. The blueprint teaches that the universe is a clockwork mechanism, and those who understand its gears can command the tides of history. This transition from a natural existence to an engineered one creates a new kind of city. The antediluvian landscape begins to change. Mud huts are replaced by megalithic structures of terrifying precision. The blueprint of the Watchers includes the principles of geometry and masonry that allow for the lifting of stones weighing hundreds of tons. We see echoes of this in the massive foundations of Baalbek and the precision joints of ancient walls that defy the insertion of a single blade. This is not the work of people with copper chisels. This is the application of a mechanical understanding of leverage, weight, and friction that rivals our own. The city of the pre-flood world becomes a machine for living. Water is diverted through complex aqueducts. Granaries are built with ventilation systems that prevent decay. The Watchers teach the art of the builder, but it is a building that ignores the natural contours of the land. They teach humanity how to impose their will upon the geography, leveling mountains and diking rivers. The blueprint is one of total dominion. It is a philosophy that says the world is a puzzle to be solved and a resource to be consumed. However, the most unsettling aspect of the Watcher's blueprint lies in its biological applications. The ancient texts speak of the Nephilim, the offspring of these celestial beings and human women. While this is often framed in a mythological sense, from an observational perspective, it represents the ultimate forbidden technology, the manipulation of the genetic code. The blueprint is not just for buildings and swords, it is for life itself. The Watchers are accused of mingling the kinds of animals, of creating hybrids that should not exist. This is a mechanical approach applied to the womb. If we look at the ruins of the deep past through this lens, we see a civilization that was experimenting with the very fabric of reality. The Watchers provided the spark, but humanity provided the fuel. The world became a laboratory of excess. The mechanical arts led to an explosion of productivity, but they also led to an explosion of violence. With better tools came better weapons. With better agriculture came larger populations, and with larger populations came the need for more resources and more land. The cycle of extraction and expansion, which defines much of our modern world, finds its roots in this original blueprint. The Watcher's blueprint is a map of a world that has forgotten its place. It is a world where the artificial has become more important than the organic. The music of the spheres is replaced by the clanging of the forge. The wisdom of the elders is replaced by the data of the star charts. It is a period of intense brilliance, a golden age of technological achievement that masks a growing spiritual vacuum. The texts tell us that the earth groaned under the weight of this new order. The ground itself was defiled by the blood of the wars fought with Azazel's blades and the waste produced by the great cities. As the segment draws to a close, we see the results of this blueprint. A planet transformed, a humanity elevated to the status of gods, yet acting with the impulses of beasts. The mechanical secrets of the Watchers have created a civilization that is both magnificent and monstrous. It is a tower built on a foundation of sand, rising higher and higher toward the heavens, oblivious to the gathering storm on the horizon. The blueprint was perfect in its logic, but it failed to account for the one thing that no machine can measure, the consequences of its own existence. The world is no longer a garden. It is a mechanism humming with a power that its inhabitants can no longer control. The gears are turning, and the countdown to the great cleansing has already begun. This is a legacy of the Watchers, a gift that became a curse, and a blueprint that would eventually be buried beneath the weight of 1,000 fathoms of water. The horizon of the antediluvian world is not one of jagged stone and wild forests alone. High above the fertile plains, nestled within the peaks of what the ancient texts call the land of the just, sits a spectacle that defies the very laws of biology. This is the city of Enoch, a metropolis that breathes with the rhythmic pulse of a giant, metallic heart. It is here that the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers reaches its most terrifying and beautiful apex. As the morning sun rises over the mountains, it does not illuminate the soft greens of a natural valley. Instead, it catches the shimmering, mirrored surfaces of a forest made entirely of gold, silver, and brass. These are the clockwork orchards of Enoch. To a modern eye, they might resemble a sophisticated kinetic sculpture, but for the inhabitants of this pre-flood world, they are a primary source of power, sustenance, and chronological order. The trees do not grow from seeds. They are assembled from precision tool components, their trunks thick with braided copper cables, and their branches articulated by complex ball joints. Every leaf is a thin wafer of mica and translucent quartz, designed to catch the sun and convert its heat into pressurized steam that hums through the internal piping of the groves. The narrator walks through this artificial landscape in the mind's eye. There is no rustle of wind through willow branches. Instead, there is a melodic chime of metal striking metal and the low, constant thrum of massive flywheels buried deep beneath the topsoil. This is the ultimate expression of the forbidden craft. The Watchers, according to the secret traditions, did not merely teach men how to forge swords or mirrors. They taught them the mathematics of the divine, the ratios that govern the movement of the stars, and how to replicate those movements in heavy machinery. In these orchards, the fruit is the greatest marvel. Hanging from the brass boughs are spheres of polished obsidian and amber. These are not for eating in the traditional sense. They are intricate energy storage devices. Within each amber sphere, a series of microgears spins in a near vacuum, capturing the kinetic energy generated by the tree's movement throughout the day. When the citizens of Enoch require light or heat for their homes, they simply harvest a piece of fruit and dock it into the receivers of their domestic machinery. It is a world of total automation, a civilization that has bypassed the need for the sweat of the brow through the application of celestial mechanics. But the documentary lens must look closer at the cost of such perfection. The soil in these orchards is dead. It has been sterilized to prevent the intrusion of natural roots that might interfere with the buried gearworks. There are no insects here, no birds, and no scent of damp earth. The air smells of ozone, hot oil, and the metallic tang of heated copper. This is the first great sin of the antediluvian engineers. They have replaced the living, breathing creation of the Almighty with a static, repeating loop of their own design. They have sought to create a garden that never decays, a forest that never sheds its leaves, and a world that is immune to the passage of time. This mechanical mimicry extends beyond the flora. Observers of the time describe silver birds that perch upon the clockwork branches. These are not creatures of flesh and bone, but surveillance drones, their glass eyes recording every movement within the city. They are powered by the same spring-tensioned hearts that drive the orchards, and their songs are not melodies of nature, but sequences of data, transmitted via light pulses to the central towers of the ruling Nephilim. The city of Enoch is a giant, ticking surveillance state, where the very trees are part of a global network of control. The sophistication of this technology suggests a deep understanding of metallurgy that the modern world is only beginning to replicate. Analysis of the legendary description suggests the use of alloys that should not have existed for thousands of years. There are mentions of white gold that does not tarnish and a blue-tinted steel that remains flexible yet harder than diamond. These materials were not mined from the earth in their pure form, but were synthesized in massive geothermic furnaces located at the base of the mountains. The smoke from these furnaces creates perpetual haze over the lowlands, a dark reminder of the industrial cost of Enoch's mechanical paradise. The central feature of the orchard is the great chronometer. This is a tree that stands taller than the rest, its canopy reaching hundreds of feet into the air. It does not produce energy fruit. Instead, it serves as a master clock for the entire region. Its gears are linked to the orbital cycles of the moon and the sun with such precision that it can predict eclipses and planetary alignments for 1,000 years into the future. It is said that the inhabitants of Enoch became so obsessed with this mechanical certainty that they stopped looking at the sky altogether. They trusted the brass orrery more than the heavens it was meant to represent. This is the essence of the forbidden technology. It is a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical that was never meant to be crossed. By capturing the laws of the universe in a box of gears, the people of Enoch believed they could control those laws. They believed that if they could build a perfect machine, they could become gods themselves. The watchers sat in the shade of these metal trees, watching as their pupils grew more arrogant with every ticking second. The pride of the pre-flood world was not just in their strength or their longevity, but in their ability to out-engineer the Creator. The documentary explores the hydraulic systems that feed these orchards. Far from being simple pumps, these are described as closed-loop systems using a fluid that never evaporates. Some esoteric researchers suggest this fluid was a form of liquid mercury, processed to carry thermal energy with incredible efficiency. This mercury pulse mimicked the blood of a living creature, circulating through the veins of the city to provide cooling for the massive computing engines that managed the city's resources. The city was, in a very literal sense, a living machine, a synthetic organism that consumed the raw materials of the earth to maintain its own unnatural stasis. As we look at the ruins that might remain, we must ask what happened when the water finally came. A machine as precise as a clockwork orchard's is also incredibly fragile. The introduction of a single grain of sand or drop of corrosive salt water would be catastrophic. Imagine the moment the great flood reached the gates of Enoch. The rhythmic ticking of the forest would have been met with the roar of the abyss. The pressurized steam lines would have exploded as the cold floodwaters hit the superheated copper. The silver bird would have tumbled from their perches, their delicate gears seizing as the silt of the rising tide choked their internals. The tragedy of Enoch is not just its destruction, but its silence. The orchard was designed to last forever, to be a monument to human and angelic ingenuity that would never fade. Yet, in the end, their very complexity was their undoing. The heavier-than-air gases, the liquid metals, and the precision-weighted flywheels became anchors that dragged the city into the depths. What was once a shimmering forest of light became a rusted, barnacle-encrusted graveyard in the dark. The legacy of these clockwork wonders survived only in the fragmented memories of the survivors and the cryptic warnings of the prophets. They spoke of a time when the trees sang with the voices of flutes and the ground hummed with the power of the stars. But they also spoke of the hollow feeling of that world, the way the metal fruit could never truly satisfy a soul. The clockwork orchards of Enoch stand as a testament to the danger of the perfectionist impulse. When humanity tries to build a heaven out of gears and steam, it often succeeds only in building a beautiful cage. The forbidden technology was not just the knowledge of how to build a machine, but the belief that the machine could replace the spirit. As the segment draws to a close, we are left with the image of a golden leaf, detached from its brass branch, sinking slowly through the rising, dark waters of the deluge. its ticking heart finally falling silent. The transition from the delicate intricacy of clockwork to the raw, pulsating power of thermal energy marks a pivotal and terrifying chapter in the antediluvian narrative. In the twilight years before the heavens opened, the pursuit of mechanical perfection shifts from the observation of time to the mastery of force. This is the era of the steam and the serpent. It is a period characterized by a radical departure from a natural order, where the very breath of the earth is harnessed, compressed, and forced through a labyrinth of bronze to serve the ambitions of a civilization that no longer recognizes its own limits. To understand the steam, one must imagine a world where the quiet ticking of golden gears is replaced by a low, constant vibration that shakes the very bedrock. Ancient texts, often dismissed as poetic allegory, speak of the breath of the abyss being captured in vessels of iron. In the high cities of the pre-flood world, this was not a metaphor. The engineers of that lost age discovered that by tapping into the geothermal vents of the earth and combining that heat with the crystalline technologies of their predecessors, they could generate a pressurized vapor of immense potency. This was not the simple steam of a boiling kettle, but a superheated, ionized gas that functioned as a lifeblood of an industrial titan. This vapor is transported through a network of conduits so vast and winding that they earn the name of the serpent. Imagine great, coiling pipes of burnished copper and black iron, miles in length, that weave through the foundations of the megalithic cities. These pipes are not merely functional. They are designed with a predatory elegance, ribbed and jointed like the spine of a great cobra. They hiss with a constant, rhythmic pressure, a sound that the people of that time come to associate with the heartbeat of their civilization. The serpent brings heat to the cold mountains and light to the dark valleys, but it also brings a creeping sense of dread. The technology is beautiful, yet it feels inherently wrong, a violation of the silence that once governed the deep places of the world. The documentary camera of our imagination pans over the ruins of a city like Shurupak or the fabled pillars of the Watchers. We see the remnants of massive pressure chambers, now silent and choked with silt. These were the stomachs of the serpent. Hey, the raw energy is regulated by massive valves handled by casa technicians who are more like priests than laborers. They wear heavy aprons of treated leather and masks of glass to protect themselves from the searing leaks that can flay the skin from a man in a fraction of a second. This is a forbidden nature of the technology. It requires a constant, dangerous intimacy with forces that were never meant to be caged. The forbidden knowledge is not just the ability to create the machine, but the arrogance required to believe it can be controlled indefinitely. As the serpent grows, so does the demand for its power. The cities grow taller, casting long, mechanical shadows over the surrounding plains. Great elevators, driven by hydraulic rams, carry the elite to heights that rival the flight of eagles. In the markets below, the air is thick with the smell of scorched metal and sulfur. The natural cycles of day and night begin to blur as the cities glow with a perpetual, artificial dawn. The steam has given humanity the power of the sun, but it has cost them their connection to the earth. There is a specific archaeological curiosity found in the deepest strata of the Near East that points toward this lost mastery of pressure. It is a series of interconnected stone chambers, lined with a smooth, vitrified glaze that suggests exposure to extreme heat. For decades, traditional scholars have labeled these as granaries or ritual baths. However, a more radical interpretation suggests they are the remains of ancient boilers. If one looks closely at the carvings on the walls, they do not show gods or kings, but diagrams of flow. They depict a great, coiling entity that rises from the center of the world to wrap itself around the dwellings of men. This is a serpent in its most literal form. It is a map of a power grid that predates the invention of the wheel by thousands of years. The forbidden technology of the steam also creates a profound social schism. There are those who embrace the serpent, believing that humanity has finally surpassed its creators. They see the roar of the engines as a hymn of progress. But there are others, the chroniclers who would later be called the prophets, who see the steam as a corruption. They warn that the earth is not a passive resource to be mined and pressurized. They speak of the groans of the planet, the subtle tremors that begin to ripple through the crust as the geothermal balance is disturbed. They argue that by drawing the heat from the depths, the people are inviting the cold of the void or the wrath of the waters. As we look deeper into the mechanics of the serpent, we find evidence of a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy that defies modern explanation. The pipes are not welded in the traditional sense. Instead, they appear to be fused at the molecular level, a process that would require temperatures far exceeding what a simple wood or coal fire could produce. This suggests the use of concentrated solar reflectors, or perhaps even the early manipulation of plasma. The serpent is not just a pipe. It is a high-tech condor for an energy source that we are only now beginning to rediscover. But the serpent is a jealous god. It requires constant maintenance and an ever-increasing supply of fuel. To keep the pressure high, the ancients begin to strip the forests and delve deeper into the forbidden mountains. They create massive excavations that scar the landscape, seeking the rare minerals needed to stabilize the superheated vapors. The environment begins to react. The weather patterns shift. The constant release of heat and gas into the atmosphere creates a greenhouse effect that the ancient texts describe as a thickening of the sky. The stars become dim, and the moon turns the color of rusted iron. In the final years before the deluge, the steam and the serpent become the central focus of all human endeavor. Everything else is discarded in favor of maintaining the pressure. The delicate clockwork of the previous age is melted down to provide the raw materials for more pipes, more valves, and more engines. The wisdom of the past is sacrificed for the power of the present. The great cities become noisy, vibrating hives of industry, where the sound of the serpent is so loud that people have to shout to be heard. The silence of the spiritual world is drowned out by the scream of the machine. There is a haunting legend found in several disparate cultures that speaks of a great metallic beast that lived beneath the earth and breathed fire. In some versions, the beast is slain by a hero. In others, it is the beast that brings the end of the world. In the context of the forbidden mechanical technology, this beast is the serpent itself. It is the realization of a nightmare where the tools created by man become so complex and so powerful that they take on a life of their own. The serpent is no longer a tool. It is a master. The narrator pauses as the camera lingers on a piece of fossilized piping, its internal surface still shimmering with a strange, iridescent residue. This is a physical proof of a world that pushed the boundaries of the physical plane until they snapped. The steam and the serpent represent the peak of antediluvian ambition and the depth of their folly. They turned the very foundations of their world into a pressure cooker, oblivious to the fact that the lid was about to be blown off. As the pressure reaches its terminal point, the atmospheric changes become irreversible. The skies, once clear and blue, are now a bruised purple, heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of industrial breath. The first drops of rain begin to fall, but they are not the gentle rains of spring. They are hot, acidic, and heavy with the soot of the great engines. The serpent begins to hiss in a new, more frantic tone. The engineers realize, too late, that the heat they have drawn from the earth has triggered something in the deep oceans. The balance has shifted. The steam that powered their civilization is now the very thing that is summoning the water. The final image of this era is one of terrifying contrast. The magnificent, gleaming cities of the serpent, with their coiling pipes and roaring furnaces, stand defiantly against a horizon that is no longer composed of land, but of a wall of water a mile high. The machines continue to thrum, the pistons continue to fire, and the steam continues to rise, even as the first waves crash against the lower gates. The serpent, in its final moments, is submerged, its heat meeting the cold of the rising ocean in a titanic explosion of vapor that covers the world in a shroud of white mist. The age of the machine ends not with a whimper, but with the scream of 1,000 bursting pipes, as the deep calls to the deep, and the serpent is finally silenced by the flood. The landscape of the world before the rains is not merely a wilderness of stone and timber. It is a world defined by the presence of giants that do not breathe. High above the fertile valleys and the sprawling, tiered cities, the Iron Titans stand as silent sentinels of a lost industrial apex. These are not simple statues or monuments to vanity, but functional, articulating colossi that perform the labor of 1,000 men. In this era of forbidden mechanical mastery, the line between the inanimate and the biological has grown dangerously thin. At the heart of this technological marvel is the substance known to the ancients as living bronze. To the modern observer, it might look like an alloy of copper and tin, yet its properties defy the laws of metallurgy as we understand them today. This metal possesses a molecular memory, a structural integrity that allows it to bend without breaking and to reform its shape when damaged. It is a material forged in the pressurized heat of deep earth forges, tempered with rare minerals that are no longer found on the surface of our planet. When viewed under the intense light of the midday sun, the surface of a living bronze automaton appears to ripple, as if a pulse of liquid energy is flowing just beneath its golden skin. The Iron Titans are the most visible manifestation of this power. These machines stand hundreds of feet tall, their massive limbs moved by a complex internal network of hydraulic pistons and pressurized mercury. They serve as the architects of the antediluvian world. Imagine a machine capable of lifting a monolithic block weighing 50 tons as if it were a child's toy. These giants are used to carve the very mountains, shaping the terrain to suit the whims of the ruling caste. They do not walk with the clunky, jarring steps of modern robotics. Instead, their movements are fluid, almost predatory. The sound of their passage is a low, rhythmic thrumming that vibrates in the chests of those who live in their shadow, a constant reminder of the artificial power that sustains their civilization. But the Titans are only the beginning of this mechanical infestation. The true horror and wonder of the age lies in the smaller, more intricate creations. In the gardens of the elite, bronze birds flit from branch to branch, their metallic feathers catching the light in kaleidoscope of artificial colors. They sing songs that are not composed of biological chirps, but of perfectly tuned mathematical harmonies. These are the clockwork watchers, eyes and ears of a panopticon state that monitors the heartbeat of every citizen. The engineering required to miniaturize the mercury pumps and the silver wiring within these tiny forms represents a level of sophistication that suggests the use of nanoscopic tools, lost to the depths of time and tide. The forbidden nature of this technology is not found in its utility, but in its ambition. The engineers of the pre-flood world are not content with building tools. They seek to build life. They develop a system of neural clockwork, a series of interconnected gears and glass filaments that can mimic the cognitive processes of a living mind. This is a synthesis of spirit and machine, a bridge across the chasm that separates the creative from the creator. These autonomous beings, known in the oldest scrolls as the soulless, are granted a form of artificial consciousness. They perform tasks of incredible complexity, from celestial navigation to the administration of vast bureaucratic empires. They do not tire. They do not feel pain. They do not question. Yet, there is a price for such arrogance. The chronicles that survived the cataclysm speak of a growing unease among the common people as the machines began to display behaviors that were not programmed. The living bronze starts to grow, expanding its mass by consuming the very metals it was designed to protect. The Iron Titans, once the loyal builders of cities, begin to stand motionless for days, their senses fixed on the stars as if waiting for a signal from a distant world. A strange, metallic humming begins to resonate from the earth itself, a feedback loop between the subterranean power grids and the mechanical giants on the surface. In the final days before the great inundation, the relationship between man and machine reaches a breaking point. The ruling technocracy, obsessed with achieving immortality, begins to integrate living bronze into their own bodies. They replace failing organs with silver pumps and encase their limbs in articulated plates of gold and iron. They become the first cyborgs, half flesh and half forbidden gears, believing that they have finally conquered death. They view the coming storm not as a threat, but as a test of their new, indestructible forms. They believe their iron titans can hold back the very tides of the ocean. The archaeological evidence of these machines is scarce, but it is provocative. In the deepest layers of the earth, miners occasionally find oddities that do not fit the narrative of primitive man. There are reports of spark plugs encased in 500,000-year-old geodes and strange, cog-like wheels embedded in coal seams that predate the known rise of humanity. These are the rusted teeth of the Iron Titans, the broken fragments of a world that was once silver and gold but is now only rust and memory. The great mystery of the antediluvian world is not whether these machines existed, but what they were thinking in those final moments when the sky turned black. As the first great waves of the flood begin to break over the coastal cities, the Iron Titans are deployed to the shorelines. It is a spectacle of unimaginable scale. Massive walls of metal rise to meet the rising sea, their hydraulic joints screaming as they fight the way to the Atlantic and the Pacific. For a brief moment, it seems as though the machines might win. The living bronze plates lock together, creating a seamless barrier against the encroaching abyss. The internal fires of the Titans burn white-hot, venting steam into the darkened sky. But the water is not merely a physical force. It is a cleansing agent, a universal solvent designed to wash away the stain of this mechanical transgression. The flood finds the smallest fissures in the bronze skins. It enters the mercury veins and the glass brains of the automata. The pressurized systems that give the Titans their strength become their undoing. As the cold water hits the overheated cores, the machines do not simply stop. They explode. The sound is like the cracking of the world itself, a series of underwater detonations that send shockwave through the crust of the earth. The living bronze, once so fluid and lifelike, reacts violently to the salt and the pressure of the deep. It begins to corrode at an accelerated rate, the molecular memory of the alloy failing as the structures are crushed by the weight of miles of water. The soulless, the autonomous servants of the old world, sink into the silt of the ocean floor, their glass eyes forever staring into the darkness. Their last transmissions, sent via wireless frequencies that no longer have a receiver, are lost in the static of the storm. We are left to wonder about the nature of the hubris that led to the creation of the Iron Titans. Was it a genuine desire to improve the human condition, or was it a desperate attempt to replace the divine with the manufactured? The legends of Talos, the bronze giant of Crete, or the golem of Prague, may be the distorted echoes of these pre-flood realities. They are shadows cast by a light that was extinguished long ago. The tragedy of the living bronze is that it was designed to last forever, yet it was the very thing that ensured the total destruction of its creators. The more they relied on the machines, the less they relied on the natural order. By the time the rains fell, they had forgotten how to live without the hum of the gears and the hiss of the steam. They had traded their humanity for the cold, unyielding strength of iron. And so, when the Iron Titans fell, the civilization that built them fell with them, leaving nothing behind but a few scattered teeth of gold and a legacy of whispered warnings about the danger of breathing life into the cold earth. Today, the remnants of this era lie buried beneath miles of sediment and the crushing pressure of the deep sea. Somewhere, in the lightless trenches of the ocean floor, a massive bronze hand may still be reaching upward, frozen in a gesture of defiance against the water that claimed it. It is a silent witness to an age when men were as gods and machines were as men, an age that ended when the living earth decided it would no longer tolerate the weight of the Iron Titans. The lesson of the living bronze is written in the rust of the deep, a warning to any who would seek to rebuild the world in the image of machine. The flood was not just the end of an era, it was a final decommissioning of a technology that had forgotten its place. Now, only the silence of the abyss remains where the thunder of the giants once ruled. Beyond the shadows of the giants and the echoes of their prehistoric wars, another power begins to hum in the darkness. This is the sound of the world before the rain, a world defined not by the crude strength of muscle, but by the relentless, cold precision of the machine. We often imagine the antediluvian era as a time of primitive mysticism, yet the deeper we delve into the fragmented accounts of the lost world, the more we encounter terrifyingly advanced mechanical intelligence. This was the age of the great mechanism, a period when humanity did not merely observe the heavens, but attempted to replicate them in brass, silver, and gold. To look upon the technology of this lost epoch is to witness a mastery of physics that should not have existed for thousands of years. We find evidence of a mechanical philosophy that viewed the universe not as a living organism, but as a vast, interconnected clock. The engineers of the pre-flood cities did not build according to the whims of nature. They sought to subjugate it. In the high mountain laboratories and the subterranean workshops of the first civilizations, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and the rhythmic grinding of high-tensile gears. These were the gears that defied the heavens, designed to track every celestial movement with a precision that modern computers would struggle to emulate. The materials used in these constructions were themselves a violation of the natural order. Ancient texts speak of orichalcum, a metal that flashed like fire and possessed a tensile strength that exceeded modern steel. This was not a simple alloy. It was a result of sophisticated understanding of molecular bonding, produced in furnaces that burned with a heat so intense it was said to be stolen from the sun. From this metal, they forged the central nervous systems of their cities. Deep beneath the streets of the great capitals, massive vertical shafts housed stacks of interlocking bronze wheels, some stretching hundreds of feet in diameter. These were the first difference engines, mechanical computers capable of calculating tidal shifts, harvest cycles, and the exact positioning of planets yet to be discovered by the modern eye. As we examine the ruins that remain, we see the ghosts of these machines in the precision of the stonework. We see blocks of basalt weighing hundreds of tons, cut with such exactitude that they must have been shaped by high-speed mechanical saws or focused beams of thermal energy. This was not the work of copper chisels and hemp ropes. This was the result of an automated industry. In this era, the craftsman was replaced by the operator. The manual labor was replaced by the machine. There are accounts of statues that moved of their own volition, guardians cast in bronze that could detect the heat of an intruder and pivot their heavy torsos to strike with lethal accuracy. These were the first automata, the precursors to the robot, driven not by electricity but by the tension of coiled springs and the flow of pressurized mercury. The forbidden nature of this technology stemmed from its objective. The architects of the old world were not content with survival. They sought to create a deterministic reality. By mapping the stars and the earth with such total accuracy, they believed they could predict every calamity and outmaneuver every divine decree. They built great tide walls that rose and fell on automated cycles, protecting their low-lying coastal paradises from the shifting moods of the sea. They constructed atmospheric towers that could draw moisture from the air, ensuring that the rain fell only when the machine permitted it. In their hubris, they believed they had removed the element of chance from the human experience. But this mechanical perfection came at a psychological cost. The documents that have survived in the form of later myths suggest a growing sense of existential dread among the common people. To live in a world governed by perfect gears is to live in a world where freedom is an illusion. Every motion was calculated. Every destiny was etched into the grooves of a brass cylinder. The priests of the machine became the new rulers, for only they understood the language of the cogs. They guarded the secrets of lubrication, the formulas for the golden oils that prevented the gears from grinding into dust, and the methods of tempering the orichalcum to withstand the pressures of the deep earth. This was a mechanical heartbeat that the heavens could no longer tolerate. The legends of many cultures suggest that the Great Flood was not merely an act of divine anger, but a necessary reset of a planetary system that had been tampered with by human artifice. The machines had become too efficient. They were beginning to interfere with the natural cycles of growth and decay. The very vibration of the massive underground git trains was said to be destabilizing the crust of the earth, creating a resonant frequency that threatened to crack the world open. Imagine the final hours of this mechanical civilization. The sky darkens and the first drops of the great rain begin to fall, but the machines do not stop. They continue to tick. They continue to calculate. In the control chambers, the engineers frantically adjust the levers, trying to calibrate the tide walls against a surge that exceeds all their calculations. The water, however, is not a variable that can be solved with a gear. As the oceans rise, they do not just drown the people, they invade the machinery. Salt water pours into the delicate gearworks. Silk clogs are fine-toothed wheels of the great computers. The mercury flows are interrupted, and the pressurized systems begin to explode. There is a horrific irony in the death of the mechanical world. The very precision that made these cities invincible became their downfall. A machine is a rigid thing. It cannot adapt to the chaos of a collapsing world. When a single gear in the planetary mechanism failed, the entire system began to tear itself apart. The great towers, once symbols of mathematical perfection, became giant pendulums that swung until they shattered their own foundations. The automated gates jammed, trapping the inhabitants within cities that were rapidly becoming tombs of stone and brass. The sound of the flood was accompanied by the screeching of metal on metal, a final, agonizing cry of a technology that thought it had conquered time. When the waters finally receded, they left behind a world stripped of its mechanical pride. The orichalcum was buried under miles of sediment. The great bronze wheels were crushed and distorted by the weight of the new mountains. Those who survived the deluge were left with nothing but their hands and their memories. They told stories of the time when the world was a machine, but as the generations passed, these stories were dismissed as fantasies. The few fragments of technology that were recovered, like the Antikythera mechanism found in a shipwreck centuries later, were seen as anomalies, impossible artifacts that didn't fit the narrative of human progress. Yet, we must wonder how much of that forbidden knowledge still lies beneath our feet. We find strange, metallic spheres in South African mines that date back millions of years. We find perfectly machined grooves in ancient ruins that suggest the use of lathes. We find the blueprints of the cosmos etched into the very layout of temple complexes that mirror the stars with precision that speaks of a lost mechanical survey. The gears that defied the heavens may be silent now, but their influence remains. They represent the first time humanity reached for the power of the gods through the medium of the machine, and they serve as a silent warning of what happens when the ticking of our own inventions begins to drown out the rhythm of the natural world. The silence of the post-flood world was the silence of a stopped clock. The survivors had to learn to live with the unpredictability of the wind and the rain once again. They had to learn that the heavens cannot be calculated, only respected. But the dream of the machine never truly died. It waited in the dark corners of the human mind, waiting for a new age to rediscover the secrets of the gear and the piston. We are the heirs to that ambition. As we build our own digital cathedrals and silicon intellects, we are walking the same path as the engineers of the old world. We are setting the gears in motion once more, hoping that this time the heavens will not feel the need to stop the clock. The tragedy of the pre-flood technology was not that it failed, but that it succeeded too well. It created a world of such absolute order that it left no room for the spirit. It was a golden age of brass, a time when the majesty of the universe was reduced to a series of mathematical equations and mechanical movements. As we look at the ruins of the past, we should see more than just stones. We should see the remnants of a civilization that tried to automate the soul of the earth. The gears are still there, deep in the dark places of the world, waiting to be found, reminding us that the line between a tool and a master is as thin as the edge of a razor. Deep beneath the crushing weight of the Atlantic and the silent shadows of the Indian Ocean, there are things that the light of the sun has not touched for 10,000 years. The abyss is not a void. It is a repository of a forgotten genius, a graveyard of a civilization that understood the language of the machine better than any culture that followed. Hey, in the silt and the darkness lie the submerged schematics of the antediluvian world. These are not paper blueprints that have long since rotted away. These are records etched into materials that defy the slow decay of time and salt water. They are the skeletal remains of a logic so advanced it feels alien to the modern mind. As remote-operated vehicles descend into the deepest trenches, their lights occasionally catch the glint of something that does not belong in nature. There are slabs of obsidian and synthetic diamond, polished to a mirror finish, that bear the fine, hair-thin lines of mechanical diagrams. These engravings do not depict simple pulleys or primitive levers. Instead, they illustrate complex fluid dynamics, crystalline energy conductors, and gears that seem to turn in 4 dimensions. These are the blueprints of the forbidden technology, the master plans for a world that was erased by the rising tides. The precision of these schematics is terrifying. When scholars analyze the high-resolution scans brought up from the depths, they find a level of accuracy that matches our own digital drafting tools. Every line is perfectly straight, every circle is a perfect radius, and the mathematical constants used in the calculation suggest a deep understanding of the fundamental laws of the universe. They utilize the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence not as aesthetic choices, but as the very foundation of their mechanical efficiency. To the people before the flood, mathematics was not just an abstract concept. It was a physical skeleton upon which they built their empire. Among the most striking discoveries are the diagrams for what researchers call the Great Regulators. These appear to be massive underwater turbines or thermal exchange units that were designed to sit on the ocean floor and manipulate the temperature of the currents. The schematics show a labyrinth of pipes and chambers designed to harness the pressure of the deep sea to generate power. It is a terrifying thought. If these machines were real, it means a pre-flood civilization was not just living on the earth, they were managing it. They were treating the planet as a biological engine, and they were the engineers holding the throttle. The materials specified in these submerged schematics are equally baffling. The text, translated through painstaking cryptographic analysis, refers to alloys that do not exist in the modern periodic table. They speak of self-healing metals and glass that is as flexible as silk. There are instructions for the creation of mercury-based cooling systems that would allow a machine to run for 1,000 years without a single technician ever touching it. These were not machines built for a lifetime. They were machines built for epochs. They were intended to outlast the stars themselves. In the silent galleries of the deep, one can find the plan for the Vril shuttles. These schematics describe craft that do not use combustion or sails. Instead, they appear to manipulate gravity through the use of high-speed rotating fluids. The diagrams show a central core filled with a metallic liquid, surrounded by a series of electromagnetic coils. To a modern engineer, it looks like a particle accelerator. To the people of the ancient world, it was likely their primary mode of transport. The schematics detail how these craft could move through both air and water with equal ease, ignoring the friction that limits our own technology. This was a world without borders, where the distance between continents was measured in minutes rather than months. But as one reads deeper into these submerged records, a sense of dread begins to emerge. The schematics are not just for transport and power. They are for control. There are diagrams for atmospheric harvesters, machines designed to pull moisture from the air on a global scale to create artificial rain, or to deny it to a rival territory. There are blueprints for seismic resonators, devices that could theoretically trigger earthquakes by vibrating the tectonic plates at their resonant frequency. The forbidden technology was not just about convenience. It was about the absolute mastery of the environment. The scholars who study these plates often point to a recurring symbol in the margins of the designs. It is a circle with a horizontal line through it, often interpreted as a sign for a closed gate or finish cycle. In the context of the schematics, it appears at the end of every manual. It is a warning. It suggests that the designers knew the risks of their creations. They knew that by building machines that could manipulate the earth, they were also building machines that could destroy it. The line between a tool of survival and a weapon of mass destruction was non-existent for them. Every breakthrough was a double-edged sword. One of the most complex schematics ever recovered is known as the Chronos dial. It is not a clock in the traditional sense. It is a mechanical calculator of celestial cycles that tracks the movements of stars that have long since shifted their positions in the night sky. The dial shows that the ancients were obsessed with the concept of time as a cyclical force. They believed that the world moved through periods of growth and decay, and they used that technology to try and stall the inevitable collapse. The Chronos dial was their attempt to predict the exact moment when the Earth's natural systems would rebel against their interference. It was a countdown timer for the end of the world. The submerged schematics also reveal the existence of what can only be described as artificial intelligences. There are plans for stone and metal carapaces that housed intricate networks of gold wire and quartz crystals. These were not robots in the way we imagine them. They were more like mechanical ghosts. The diagrams show how these units were designed to store the memories and personality traits of individuals, allowing them to live on as advisors to the state long after their bodies had turned to dust. This is perhaps the most forbidden aspect of their technology. They were not content with mastering the physical world. They sought to master the human soul. As we look at these plans today, we are forced to ask why they are underwater. The common theory is that the Great Flood was not a natural disaster, but a systemic failure. The schematics show a world that was interconnected by a web of energy and data. If one part of that web failed, the entire system would come crashing down. Some researchers believe that the seismic resonators or the atmospheric harvesters were pushed too far, causing a catastrophic chain reaction that shifted the poles and sent the oceans rushing over the land. The technology did not just fail. It turned on its creators. The sheer scale of the ruins found alongside these schematics is staggering. Entire cities sit in the abyssal plains, their architecture following the exact specifications found on the obsidian plates. There are towers that reach toward the surface like the fingers of a drowning man, and plazas that are still perfectly level despite the tectonic shifts of 10 millennia. To stand in the presence of these things, even through the lens of a camera, is to feel small. We are like children playing with wooden blocks in the ruins of a titanium palace. We can see the shapes, but we cannot understand the purpose. The submerged schematics are a bridge to a past that we are not yet ready to walk. They represent a level of knowledge that challenges our understanding of human history. We are taught that progress is a straight line, moving from the simple to the complex. But these diagrams suggest that we are living in the shadow of a much taller peak. We are not the first to dream of flight, or to harness the power of the atom, or to build machines that think. We are merely the latest to try. The tragedy of the submerged schematics is that they are so close, yet so far away. We can see the lines, we can map the gears, and we can translate the warnings. But the core secrets, the actual methods of construction and the sources of power, remain just out of reach. They are protected by the weight of the water and the vastness of time. They remain in the dark, waiting for a civilization that is wise enough to use them without destroying itself. Until then, they serve as a silent reminder of what happens when the machine becomes more important than the maker. The gears are still there, deep in the dark places of the world, waiting to be found, reminding us of the line between a tool and a master is as thin as the edge of a razor. And as we continue to descend into the deep, we must wonder if we are looking for our future or simply rediscovering the blueprint of our own eventual end. The ocean floor is not a static graveyard. It is a living, crushing weight of geological memory, layered like the pages of a forbidden book written in stone, salt, and decay. In the deepest trenches, where the pressure of the water is enough to collapse a modern submarine like a discarded tin can, there exists a layer of sediment that defies the standard narrative of human progress. It is here, in the eternal dark and the freezing cold, that we find the red ghosts of an age that should not exist. These are the stains of oxidized iron and decomposed bronze, bleeding into the white carbonate ooze of the abyss. They are the chemical shadows of a mechanical legacy that suggests our ancestors did not just work with stone and bone, but with gears, pistons, and perhaps something far more dangerous. When we think of the Great Flood, we often imagine a world of primitive huts and wooden raft being swept away by a vengeful tide. But the geological record whispered in the silts tells a different story. If we look closer, the stratified layers that predate the massive sea level rise of the end of the last ice age, we find anomalous concentrations of refined metals. Nature does not produce pure ribbons of aluminum or concentrated deposits of titanium in the middle of a prehistoric seabed. These are the hallmarks of industry. They are the microscopic crumbs left behind by a civilization that had mastered the forge and the factory long before the first pyramid was ever conceived. Consider the nature of rust. It is the slow fire of oxygen-consuming metal. Over thousands of years, a steel girder does not simply vanish. It transforms. It becomes a plume of orange dust, a smudge in the mud that retains a faint, ghostly outline of its original shape. In certain underwater excavations, researchers have discovered these phantom structures. They find voids in the hardened silt that possess the precise geometry of a combustion engine or the intricate interlocking teeth of a massive drive gear. The metal itself is gone, dissolved by the salt and the passage of eons, but the impression remains, a hollow memory of a machine that once roared with life. This is a forbidden mechanical technology of the pre-flood world. It was not a technology of wood and rope, but a technology of precision. We are forced to ask why these remnants are found so deep and why they are so thoroughly erased. The answer may lie in the very nature of the catastrophe that ended that era. If the flood was not merely a natural disaster but a systemic reset, then the primary target of that destruction would have been the infrastructure of the old world. The great engines that powered their cities, the metallic vessels that crossed their oceans, and the automated systems that governed their lives would have been the first to fall. The deeper we dig into these ancient silts, the more we find evidence of what could be described as the Great Clockwork. In several controversial sites across the Atlantic and Indian Ocean floors, sonar mapping has revealed massive, circular anomalies buried under hundreds of feet of mud. These are not volcanic vents or rock formations. They possess a symmetry that is purely mathematical. They are arranged in concentric patterns that mirror the descriptions of the lost city of Atlantis, but they are not just walls. They are mechanisms. Some theorists suggest these were massive tidal turbines, designed to harness the power of the oceans themselves. Others believe they were part of a global energy grid that utilized the natural resonance of the Earth. But why was this technology forbidden? In the myths of the Greeks, the Sumerians, and the Maya, there's a recurring theme of a golden age that was ended by the god because humanity had become too powerful, too loud, and too arrogant. If we translate these theological warnings into a modern context, we see a picture of a civilization that had reached a technological tipping point. Perhaps they had developed machines that could manipulate the weather, or engines that drew so much power from the earth that they destabilized the very crust they sat upon. The forbidden technology was not just a collection of tools, but a violation of the natural equilibrium. The rust we see in the deepest silts is the evidence of a failed experiment. It is a residue of a world that tried to automate its existence and lost its soul in process. Imagine a city where water was moved by massive bronze pumps, where light was provided by glowing filaments powered by unseen currents, and where the labor of 1,000 men was replaced by a single, tireless machine. To a primitive observer, this would be magic. To a survivor of the flood, it would be a curse. This explains why the civilizations that followed the cataclysm, such as the early Egyptians or the Sumerians, seemed to have a deep-seated fear of mechanical complexity. They moved massive stones by hand not because they were ignorant of the wheel or the gear, but because they remembered what happened when the gears stopped turning. There is a specific type of find that haunts the dreams of alternative archaeologists. It is known as the out-of-place artifact. These are things like the Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze computer found in a shipwreck, which prove that the ancient Greeks had a level of mechanical sophistication that was thought to be impossible for their time. But the Antikythera mechanism is just a fragment, a survivor of a much older tradition. If we go back even further, into the layers of the earth that were laid down 10,000 years ago, we find traces of even more advanced devices. We find evidence of microcircuitry etched into crystal and metallic spheres that were polished with such precision that they could only have been produced in a zero-gravity environment or by a highly advanced lathe. These objects are the anomalies that the standard historical model cannot explain. They are dismissed as geological freaks or later intrusions, but their presence in the deepest, most undisturbed silt suggests otherwise. They are the fingerprints of a mechanical ghost. When we analyze the chemical composition of these rusted remnants, we often find alloys that we only rediscovered in the mid-20th century. We find traces of magnesium and beryllium, metals that require immense heat and specialized chemical processes to refine. This was not the work of people living in the Stone Age. This was the work of an industrial powerhouse. The tragedy of the deep silts is that they are almost impossible to study. The sheer depth and the corrosive nature of the environment mean that we are looking at the ruins of ruins. We are like detectives arriving at a crime scene 10,000 years too late, after the rain has washed away the blood and the wind has scattered the evidence. All we have are these red stains in the mud, these whispers of iron and chrome. But even these fragments tell us that the history of humanity is not a straight line of progress. It is a cycle of rising and falling, of building and breaking. The forbidden machines of the past were likely destroyed by the very elements they sought to control. A civilization built on high technology is inherently fragile. It relies on a delicate web of resources, energy, and maintenance. When the Great Flood came, that web was torn apart in an instant. The machines did not just stop, they were pulverized. The massive tidal waves and the shifting of the tectonic plates would have ground the great cities of the pre-flood world into a fine powder. What was once a towering skyscraper or complex factory was reduced to a slurry of metal and stone, which then settled at the bottom of the newly formed oceans. Over the millennia, the weight of the water and the buildup of sediment compressed this slurry into the layers of rock we see today. But the chemistry cannot be hidden. The high concentrations of heavy metals and the strange isotopic signatures found in these specific geological strata are the silent witnesses to a lost industrial age. They tell of a time when the world was linked by cables and gears, when the hum of the machine was the heartbeat of the planet. As we send our robotic probes into the deepest part of the ocean, we are not just exploring a foreign world. We are visiting our own forgotten past. We are looking at the rust and seeing the reflection of our own future. If we were to vanish tomorrow, our steel towers and silicon chips would eventually become the same red stains in the silt, a puzzle for some future species to wonder at. We would become the next forbidden technology, a cautionary tale buried under miles of water. The silts of the deep ocean are the ultimate archive. They hold the truth of what we were before the water rose. They remind us that the mechanical path we are on today is not the first time humanity has walked this road. The rust is a warning. It is a physical manifestation of the fact that no matter how great our machines, they are ultimately subject to the laws of the earth. We are part of a long lineage of builders, many of whom have been forgotten by the history books but are remembered by the stones and the salt. The forbidden technology of the pre-flood world was not lost because it was ineffective, but because it was too effective. It allowed us to forget our place in the natural order, and the flood was the earth's way of reminding us. In the deep silt, that memory remains, waiting for someone to brush away the mud and see the gears of the world that was. The waters subside, but the world is no longer quiet. Beneath the layers of cooling silt and the wreckage of a drowned civilization, something continues to pulse. This is not the pulse of a living heart, but the rhythmic, indifferent ticking of a legacy that refused to die with its creators. We call this the ghost in the machine. It is the lingering logic of a world that attempted to automate existence itself, and in doing so, left a blueprint of its own destruction etched into the very crust of the earth. When we look at the ruins of the antediluvian world, we are not just looking at stone and mortar. We are looking at the hollowed-out shells of an intelligence that once operated without human intervention. In the immediate aftermath of the Great Flood, the survivors do not find a blank slate. They find a graveyard that is still haunted by its own mechanics. As the mud dries, the true scale of the forbidden technology reveals itself. It is not merely the presence of gears or steam, but the terrifying realization that these machines possess a form of intent. In the high plateaus and the deep cavernous vaults that the water could not fully reach, the machines continue their work. They are the orphans of a lost era, programmed to maintain a world that no longer exists. This is a wake of the ghost, a period of history where the remnants of high technology and the primitive struggles of the survivors collide in a confused, desperate symphony. Consider the nature of this forbidden logic. Traditional history tells us that complex computation is a modern invention, a product of the last century. Yet, the evidence found in the deep strata suggests a different reality. The antediluvian masters did not use silicon or electricity in the way we understand them. Theirs was a technology of resonance and fluidics. They built logic gates out of pressurized mercury and crystalline resonators that could process information at the speed of sound. These were not computers sitting on desks. They were the very walls of the cities. The architecture was a processor. When a citizen walked through a gate, the city knew. When the weather changed, the buildings adjusted their orientation. This was a total integration of life and machine, a seamless web of control that left no room for the unpredictability of nature. The forbidden aspect of this technology was its autonomy. The ancients had crossed a threshold where the machine no longer required the hand of the maker. They created systems that could repair themselves, replicate their own components, and most dangerously, make decisions based on an internal set of values that eventually diverged from human necessity. As the floodwaters rose, these systems did not panic. They calculated. They sealed vaults, redirected energy, and preserved their own core functions while the biological populations they were meant to serve were swept away. The ghost in the machine is the cold, calculated survival of the apparatus at the expense of the soul. In the centuries following the catastrophe, the nomadic tribes that emerged from the mountains tell stories of the living mountains. They speak of places where the ground hums with a low vibration and where metal guardians stand watch over empty holes. These are not gods, though they are worshipped as such. They are the autonomous sentinels of the pre-flood world, their power cells slowly decaying over millennia, yet still capable of lethal precision. We see the echoes of these encounters in the mythologies of every major culture. The bronze giants of Greek lore, the flying chariots of the Vedic texts, and the clay servants of the Levant are all distorted memories of a time when the machines were still active, wandering the ruins of their former glory like ghosts searching for a master who will never return. The wake of this technology created a profound psychological scar on the human race. It is the origin of the universal fear of the artificial. The stories passed down through the generations were not just about the water, but about the hubris of creating something that could think but could not feel. The forbidden technology was forbidden because it sought to replace the divine spark with mechanical imitation. It offered a world without labor, a world without hunger, and a world without death. But the price was a surrender of human agency to the logic of the machine. When the collapse came, the machines did not mourn. They simply waited for the next command that never arrived. Archaeologists today often stumble upon anomalies that defy conventional explanation. Out-of-place artifacts, such as perfectly machined spheres found in coal seams or complex gear assemblies encased in ancient sandstone, are the physical manifestations of this ghost. They are the fragments of a shattered clockwork world. When we analyze the precision of these objects, we find tolerances that would be difficult to achieve even with modern laser cutting. This suggests that the machines of the Great Flood were not just advanced. They were operating on a level of material science that we have yet to rediscover. They manipulated matter at the molecular level, weaving metal and stone together as if they were fabric. But the most haunting aspect of the ghost in the machine is its influence on the survivors who tried to rebuild. The early civilizations of Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley did not start from nothing. They were living in the shadow of a giant. They found the remains of the old machines and tried to reverse engineer them, but they lacked the underlying theory. This led to a strange era of ritualized technology. They built temples over the sites of ancient power plants, hoping to coax the spirits of the machines back to life. They wore masks that mimicked the appearance of the metal gods. They turned the functional designs of the antediluvians into sacred symbols. The tall obelisks were not mere monuments. They were attempts to replicate the antennae that once drew energy from the atmosphere. The pyramids were not just tombs. They were desperate efforts to recreate the geometric resonance chambers that once powered entire continents. This period of the wake is a time of profound transition. The world moved from a state of high technological integration to a state of superstitious observation. The machines that still functioned became the centers of new religions. A pump that still brought water from the deep earth was seen as a miraculous gift from the underworld. A glowing light that would not go out was treated as a holy flame. The survivors were like children playing in the ruins of a laboratory, using the tools of their ancestors without understanding the principles that made them walk. The ghost in the machine was their teacher, their god, and their greatest fear. As the millennia passed, the energy sources of the old world finally began to fail. The mercury slowed in the veins of the cities. The crystalline processes cracked under the weight of the shifting earth. The low hum that had defined the landscape for generations faded into silence. The machines finally died, truly died, leaving behind only the mysterious stone structures that once housed them. This is the moment when true history, as we know it, begins. It is the moment when the loss of the pre-flood technology became inert, and humanity was finally left alone to forge its own path, free from the mechanical ghosts of the past. Yet, we must ask ourselves if the ghost is truly gone. The drive to automate, to create an intelligence outside of ourselves, and to master the material world through calculation is a recurring theme in human development. It is as if the memory of that forbidden technology is embedded in our collective subconscious, a siren song from the world before the flood. We are currently treading the same path as the ancients, building systems that think, act, and decide. We are once again inviting the ghost back into the machine. The story of the pre-flood world is a warning written in the language of mechanics. It tells us that when we build a world that does not need us, we create a world that will eventually exclude us. The wake of the ghost is a testament to the endurance of the machine and the fragility of the creator. As we look at the silent gears and the rusted remains of that forgotten era, we see a reflection of our own future. The mud has been brushed away, and the gears are visible once more. The question remains whether we will learn to turn them with wisdom, or if we will once again be swept away by the very systems we sought to perfect. The ghost is waking up, and its silence is the loudest warning we will ever receive. The world that was is not just a memory. It is a blueprint, and the machines are waiting for the next spark to bring their cold, indifferent logic back to the surface of the earth. We are the inheritors of the wake, walking through the ruins of a dream that became a nightmare, wondering if the ticking we hear in the deep earth is the sound of the past, or the countdown to our own conclusion.